Good evening, folks, and welcome to Discovering. Ever since I've fallen into this role, I've learned a ton about how our natural resources are managed, about the various stakeholder groups, and how everything from regulations to licenses are determined. On tonight's show, I sit down and chat with NRC Chair Becky Humphries, and then I meet up with Travis White of Keweenaw Charters about a bill to restructure how DNR fisheries are funded and what changes anglers could see with it. So sit back and relax. It's Monday night, and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill, the eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Earlier this year, I sat down with NRC Chair Becky Humphries to chat about the role of the Natural Resources Commission, how they work with the DNR, and Becky's extensive resume in wildlife conservation.
I'm Becky Humphries, and I am now the chair of the Natural Resources Commission. Been there, I started last year. The governor's office asked me if I would step into that role, and the director asked me if I'd come on board. And so I always said I'd never join the NRC because when I worked for the state and was state director, they were my bosses, and I just didn't think that was fair to new directors. But when the director asks for your help, that's when you say yes. Oh. But I worked for the department for 32 years. I actually started with the Fish and Wildlife Service and decided pretty quickly that federal service was not for me. I'd much rather work closer to the people and on state issues. So I went to the DNR in the late 70s, was a field biologist for years, worked in the field, and then finally went into Lansing and was wildlife division chief for, I think, 5 or 6 years, and then stepped up and did the director's job and was there for 7 years. And then I went to work for Ducks Unlimited for a period, which I actually love the nonprofit conservation world. I love the department too, don't get me wrong, but it was really kind of refreshing to work in a nonprofit segment. And then I went to the National Wild Turkey Federation. I was their CEO. So, and then I actually retired, or tried to retire, 3 years ago now. And I failed at it miserably, to be honest with you. One of the other organizations I sit on their board is the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and their CEO resigned pretty suddenly, so they asked me to step in and do an interim stint there, and I moved back on their board after I finished as a period of CEO. And I sit on the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation board also, so I'm pretty busy these days.
Yeah. Being retired.
No paycheck coming in, but pretty busy.
No pay. So as a Natural Resources Commission, is that volunteer?
It is.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a 7-member bipartisan commission appointed by the governor, and they're all volunteers that serve on that.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about the NRC and what, the role is, what the Natural Resources Commission is and what its role is in managing.
Yeah, the Natural Resources Commission was a model. Commissions were formed around the country early in the conservation days to really buffer the governor's office and the turnover in governor's offices from natural resource management. We had a ballot initiative in Michigan a number of years ago that was what we call Proposal G, but essentially it gives the Natural Resources Commission exclusive authority to set hunting seasons and fishing seasons and the regulations that go along with that.
What is the process, with between the DNR and the Natural Resources Commission?
Well, we have kind of a schedule that has been set up so that we're not trying to go in and change regulations each and every year. Some of them are on 2-year cycles, sometimes every 3-year cycles. But the department starts preparing for that by looking at the biological data. They also kind of keep track, and so does the commission, of issues they've heard. Things that are working really well that hunters and anglers like, things that don't work so well, and also take a look at, is it achieving the biological results that we really hope for in there? And so with that, we have 2 committees, a Fisheries Committee and Wildlife Committee of the Commission. The department and the commissioners, the subcommittees, start having discussions about what all they're looking at and what the commission would like to see, not in terms of regulations, but issues they've heard. As we go through that process then, that starts months in advance, the department takes input from a lot of the user groups. So for some species, we have work groups or advisory groups. It might be trappers, it might be the bear hunter groups, it might be the deer hunting groups. And so with that, we wind up sitting down. They gather a lot of that input. A lot of times commissioners sit in and listen to some of that. But then there are also survey data that comes in terms of what's happening biologically, and also what is the hunting public saying to us. They're added, surveys in terms of how much time they're spending afield, the effort, the results of that, but also their wishes as we move forward. And that all comes into the commission as far as the presentation. It's written up. For instance, we just started deer regulations. So in January, the department kicked it off by giving an overview of the 10-year plan, which we're at the very tail end of it. It's 10 years old now, so it's ready for renewal. But kind of an overview of what's in the plan, the goals of that plan, and some of the issues that we still need to work on in that plan. Then they'll start bringing us recommendations based on what they're hearing from groups and seeing biologically. The commission will take that along with input they get directly, and then they will, it comes to these orders, they come in the terms of a memorandum that's an amendment to the Wildlife Conservation Order, which is the regulation on the books. And the commission has a chance to hear it for information, gather input, and they don't act on it until the following month. So it's out there usually for 45 days or so. It has to be out for at least 30 days. Sometimes, if we are not up against a deadline with printing a hunting guide, or we're hearing an awful lot of conflicting opinions, public opinions, we might carry it over another month to get additional feedback, to ask questions, to look at, possibly finessing the recommendation a little bit to better meet the desires or the needs that we have to achieve. And then the commission either passes or fails the amendment, and it becomes regulation. So, and we have these at public meetings, all our discussions. We don't get together as a quorum, so all 7 of us, except in public settings. So it's very open and transparent. We do have these committee meetings where it's a sub part of the commission that meets and talks about it in more detail, and then brings recommendations to the full commission. But the full commission can propose amendments. So it's, it's quite a give and take process that we do. And it's, it's always one of those where there are different opinions in terms of how we should manage species, what the regulations should look like. And that's good. People are passionate, they care, and they have an interest in it.
Are there any other goals or anything big items on the agenda for the NRC this year?
Well, more than anything, I think we want to get out and try and find out what's really important to sports persons in the state. What are they interested in? What are they frustrated with? How can we move these regulations so that people can go out and enjoy abundant resources and protect, narrow resources? And then having that good working relationship with the department, so that as we work on regulations, there are no surprises either way. That helps.
Welcome back. I am joined by Travis White of Keweenaw Charter Fishing, and today we are talking about House Bill 5093, which could reshape how Michigan funds and manages its fisheries. Welcome, Travis. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Kristen.
So, other than Keweenaw Charter Fishing, you wear a couple of other hats. Tell us what else you do.
Sure, I do wear a couple of hats. I'm a research engineer at Michigan Tech's Great Lakes Research Center, so I spend a lot of time on and around the water. We deploy a lot of instrumentation out in Lake Superior and the Great Lakes to measure things like weather, waves, gather data to help scientists make management decisions. I've also got some fisheries research projects going on, which we may be talking about more soon. And then in the summertime, I take advantage of as much of my free time as I can to take folks out fishing and experience our wonderful resources here in the Upper Peninsula and Lake Superior.
Obviously, so fisheries is very important to you.
Near and dear to my heart, yeah.
So we're talking about House Bill 5093. Tell us what it is and why we are discussing it today.
Yeah, so to kind of start out with, basically House Bill 5093 is a piece of legislation that's working its way through the state of Michigan's House of Representatives. This legislation is designed to update the funding model that basically takes your fishing license dollars and makes sure that those are directed to the Fisheries Division, which is part of Michigan Department of Natural Resources. But we're specifically looking at this bill as a measure to provide a sustainable funding model for Fisheries Division to help stock fish, do the science, put the biologists out in the field who are making sure our fisheries are well stocked and high quality.
So how are fisheries currently funded then?
So in the state of Michigan, it follows the North American model of wildlife conservation. So hunters and anglers buy fishing and hunting licenses, and those dollars come into the state, and that is in turn invested into the resource. So what we're concerned with House Bill 5093 is looking at the structure of how those dollars are redistributed out to the Fisheries Division specifically, and we're trying to overhaul to provide a more sustainable funding model looking ahead, given that there have been some real challenges in the last decade or so.
Mm-hmm. You know, anglers, fishermen, what are they going to see on their end with this bill?
So some of the key things with this bill is it's going to adjust the fishing license cost. No surprise, costs have gone up over the last decade or so. So the last funding bill was passed in 2013. So our current fishing license at $26 has not changed in over 13 years. So this bill will adjust that. It will raise it by $2 to the same level that it was in 2013, actually, or prior to 2013. But in addition to that, we're incorporating a hatchery stamp, which is a $5 stamp that will provide 100% return back to fish hatcheries and stocking programs, as well as the kind of the biological assessment that happens in the lakes and streams to figure out where to put these fish and manage those fisheries. So one thing that's really important to note as well is that with the Fisheries Division's funding every year, there are also federal dollars that come into the state to kind of boost and support these. That's through the Dingell-Johnson Act.
Awesome. So the hatchery stamp is that kind of like the trout stamp that was before? Is this just an optional stamp that people can purchase just to help out the hatcheries, or is this something people have to purchase to fish certain species?
Yeah, so the hatchery stamp in this bill will pertain to any of the stock species. So if you fish for walleye, salmon, trout, muskie, this stamp will be required to pursue those species because those are all ones that are being stocked through our state hatcheries. One other thing that some of the Great Lakes anglers might like about this is that this hatchery stamp will also allow for trolling with an unlimited number of rods on the Great Lakes. It doesn't change your daily possession limit, but if you're a solo angler and you like to head on Lake Superior and you want to use 4 lines, that will also allow you to do that.
Okay, great. So they're not like limited to how many lines based on how many people are on the boat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect.
One other mechanism of the bill that is 5093 is cost of living adjustment. So we don't want to have to revisit and rewrite this bill every decade or so when times are becoming really tight because the funding has stayed flat and costs are going up. So this bill includes a mechanism where the chief of fisheries can discretionally increase the license fees up to a fixed amount. So I believe it's somewhere in order of a percent or two a year at most, and that will allow our license fees to kind of track with inflation over time. And that was one of the major things missing from the prior funding bills. So then another really important part of the bill is that it establishes and formalizes the Fisheries Oversight Committee. So currently, the Fisheries Oversight Committee has about 10 representatives. I'm the one from the UP representing us right now. And we are kind of the original group that has proposed and developed and worked with stakeholders to put this draft bill together with their legislators. But going forward, the text of 5093 looks to establish and formalize this oversight committee as a stakeholder group, which will act as sort of a group that sits between the legislator and the fisheries division to ensure that appropriations from the state are being made as described in the bill to fisheries division, so that they're getting fully funded and none of that money is going elsewhere, which has happened in the past decade or more. So that's a really important part, is making sure appropriations are happening. And then the other part of that is making sure that the fisheries division has oversight, where we're reviewing their budgets on an annual basis and spending, ongoing, to make sure that their decisions are in line with what stakeholders are expecting.
And there was nothing like this before.
No, before, that's part of the problem, is that we didn't have a group like the Oversight Committee to help ensure that funds aren't getting diverted away from Fisheries Division. And one really important example of that is in the last decade, the state agreed to a senior citizen license discount where the state would reimburse the Fisheries Division for that discount. Unfortunately, those discounts have not been reimbursed, and giving the demographics of our state's fishermen, that's a really significant loss of revenue that the division would have used otherwise to enhance and protect our fisheries. And that's what we need the public to understand, is that when you buy a license, you just expect, that myself, when I buy a license, I expected all of that money was going into the fisheries. But what I've learned through the process and being a part of this committee to try to fix this is that, a fraction of that, almost half of my license, was going back to fisheries, the rest being diverted elsewhere. So a big part of this bill is to make sure that, closer to that full amount of my license is going into the fisheries. And the way the bill's written now, I believe that number is 80% will go into fisheries at a minimum. So.
A really big reason to support this.
Yes.
Where is this bill at right now?
This has been about a year and a half long process from coming up with the ideas, getting support from our respective organizations and other stakeholder groups across the state. Right now we have over 140 groups, businesses, sportsmen's clubs, travel and tourism related organizations that have signed on to support House Bill 5093, and that was introduced at the beginning of this year in the State House Natural Resources and Tourism Committee, and that is just about to exit committee. So currently in early June, they're scheduled to take a vote on this. So if this bill passes in the State House, then it will advance to the Senate, where it has to also go through the same level of committee review and then come to a vote. So we are really hopeful and optimistic that by the end of this year, we could see, a vote to pass 5093. With that in mind, it will take another year's cycle on account of how budgets and licenses are set in advance. It'll take at least another year to implement these changes. So, we're about a couple years into this process with a couple years to go before we can see the full benefits of it.
And viewers that are watching this and wondering how they can support it, or maybe they don't support it, there is that too. Is there still time for them, and how do they, voice their opinion to their legislators?
Yeah, well, I think right now is really the time for folks to, one, read the bill. It's out there, so you can Google House Bill 5093. You'll find the full original draft text of that online. Contacting our local representatives, both in the House and the Senate, would be a really great step. We've also got a sign-on letter that it's just a one-page letter explaining kind of the benefits and overview of the bill. And if anyone would like to sign on supporting as a business or an organization with some interest in this, they can contact me at qnscharters@gmail.com. I'm happy to send a draft of that, and they can sign on to join our roll of over 140 groups who are speaking up for this bill right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for taking the time to learn about this, and I really hope that some of your viewers will take a look at the bill and hopefully provide their support for this, because it's really important to our fisheries.
That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.